You mentioned that they seem to have a belief system as well. Could you talk about that?
It's the Illuminati is the continuation of the mystery religions. As someone who becomes an adept of the Illuminati, they have to learn a whole series of paths. They give the different types of occult knowledge names from the 12 apostles of Judas, plus the 13th is called the Holy Grail. So, as these men and women become very skilled in occult knowledge, and I'm not sure how much I should go into that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that they'll be trained in alchemy, they'll be trained in Indian sorcery, they'll be trained in Druidism, Enochian magic, Gnosticism, Hermetic magic, Kabbalism, Plato, Sufism. They'll know all the different branches of occultism. You've got different levels that people operate within the Illuminati. There's the anarchy level, which is your common witchcraft covens, and then you got your hierarchy level. And on the anarchy level, there are thousands and thousands of covens. In fact, I have listed the addresses and the names of hundreds of these in one of my book of these covens. These covens are very eclectic. They can have their own traditions, their own rituals. There's a wide variety of practices on the anarchy level. In fact, that's what it looks like, is total anarchy. One doesn't see any connection. If you're programmed to multiple, you can function at many different levels, and you can have one personality that's in this coven, and another personality that's in that coven, and this personality that's in the Masonic Lodge, and this personality that participates in this hierarchy ceremony, and another personality that participates in another satanic ritual. It's very broken up. So one of the reasons why it's not easy to answer your question is basically everything we understood about human behavior and how to gauge or judge people is obsolete, because the mind control, by creating programmed multiple personalities, has made all of our ways of judging people obsolete. And so a person within the Illuminati, the supreme goal of somebody in the Illuminati is to balance their good deeds with their bad deeds. They're dualists. They're Luciferians at the highest level. And that's why your greatest philanthropist will very often be your highest ranking Satanist, because what they're trying to do with their philanthropy, which a lot of their philanthropy is self-serving, when you actually look at it, it's not as generous as it appears at first. But they're trying to do good deeds and then balance those with their bad deeds, because they believe in balance in their religion. It's a Gnostic Luciferianism.
Now, I'd like to talk about the mind control that the Illuminati have used and the techniques therein. What is your understanding of how they have used mind control, and what form of mind control?
The word that I like to use is total mind control, because it totally controls the person's body, soul, and spirit. And the common person out there has never really imagined that something so all-encompassing or so horrendous or so totally powerful as even exists. And when I say mind control, some people think, oh, television, yeah, or they think, oh, yeah, subliminals. No, I'm talking about something that's 1,000 or 10,000 times more powerful. this mind control is totally undetectable, and it totally controls the person, and it uses every known technique of controlling a person wrapped up in a sophisticated group package. And you have 100 techniques wrapped up together like that, you make a package deal that totally locks the victim in to the control.
So can you talk about some of these techniques individually and how they were used as the group package?
Yeah. When I started out to describe to people what was going on, I had files and files. I had about 150 files of different techniques. And I was thinking to myself, well, I can't talk about 150 techniques. That's too overwhelming for people. And so I thought, and I realized that all of these techniques broke down into 12 sciences. One of the sciences is the science of trauma and torture. Another science is how to use drugs, apply drugs to control a person, and another science that they have is their ability to use different mental states, which is hypnosis, disassociation, the trance states. Another one of their sciences is their skill at deceiving people and deceiving the victim themselves. One needs to understand, the listener needs to understand that these victims of Illuminati mind control do not even know themselves that they're under control. And there's a science of using spiritual things to control a person. In fact, actually, that is the perhaps one of the major, if not the most major, method of controlling a person. One of the things it's not politically popular for today for people in science to admit that mankind has a spiritual side to them, but humans do have a spiritual side to them. And the Illuminati understand how to spiritually control someone. Their understanding of that has boggled my mind. They have only allowed the common people, even the Christian people, a lot of our ministers only understand the crumbs have only gotten the crumbs, so to speak, on how to develop a person spiritually.
And how do you feel that they have developed this and gained this knowledge?
Well, a lot of it began back in the sleep temples of the Egyptians. We go back to your Egyptian priesthood and the mystery religions. They were already learning at that time how to use electric shock. They used electric eels and other things to electrically shock people. They had already started to learn the use of drugs and herbs to create altered states and to control people. These were secrets, though, that were very closely guarded by these Illuminati families and their mystery religion priesthoods. But they continued to develop these over the centuries. They want the traumatization to begin very early on because they want somebody who can trance out and disassociate from the pain. So you're probably familiar, and the listeners are probably familiar with the Indian fakers, the holy men in India who can walk on coals and stick pins in them and sleep on beds of nails. Well, this actually happens. Well, how does it happen? It's because they are able to disassociate and go into a trance state. And that's an altered state. The Illuminati want to create individuals who are able to disassociate very well, because that's part of the requirement to have the ability to become a multiple personality.
And that is the purpose of the traumatization, is to create that dissociation?
Yeah, that's one of the purposes.
And what is the what is the importance of dissociation then within the total mind control?
It's extremely important. You'll hear a lot in recent times about electronic mind control, and that's being used to divert people away from the more important issue of multiple personality disorder, or DID. The ability to create multiple personalities that are programmed is extremely important. It's why they have the ability to be secret. It's why they're able to do so much in secret. The electronic mind control, throwing mental ideas into somebody's brain which are foreign, is not that much of a threat. I have worked with quite a few victims of electronic mind control, and the majority, if not all of them, are able to recognize that something's being beamed into their heads that's foreign. But when you are disassociated, when you have amnesia walls between yourself and other parts of your mind, you don't know what you yourself are in your entirety are all about. So hypnosis and trance and disassociation, they're all just different aspects of the same thing. And the Illuminati excuse me, have learned over the centuries how to put people into different states, mental states, and when information is learned in these different states, then to access that information best, you need to go back to that particular state. When you get into a particular situation that's reminiscent of a previous experience, that's when your memory of it is best triggered. Now they go a lot further than just using natural disassociation. They've learned how to create amnesia walls within the mind, and it's basically what they're doing to the mind is the same as what we do with computers. In order to make computers functional, they had to figure out some way to section off part of the computer's memory so that the user could not access that memory. They had to nest that memory. In human terms, you could say there's an amnesia wall there. How to build walls in the mind to mentally section off the mind. And they do this through trauma. If you get a severe enough trauma, what the mind will do in order to continue functioning is it will disassociate that trauma with an amnesia wall. For instance, if let's say you were in war and your best friend has just gotten blown to smithereens by an artillery piece, his guts are laying out, your mind may build amnesia walls around this event and you may not be able to remember it. So the worse the trauma, the better the amnesia walls. So the Illuminati take a small child at about 2 and they begin traumatizing it with the worst traumas that are imaginable so that they can create these amnesia walls. They find these disassociated pieces of the mind, which are just like, in a sense, floppy disks, and then they put in their programming to each of these disassociated parts of the mind as to what they want that part to become. Some of these parts they make into personalities, and so they create MPD, DID. They create multiple personalities, and then while they're creating these multiple personalities, they're programming them to be exactly what they want them to be. The programmers like to say this child is a piece of clay, and they view themselves as the potters to that clay. They're very skilled in knowing how to take a child and work with that child's mind to create what they want. You've got researchers like Hans Eisnick, who happened to have been born in Germany but left Germany. But anyway, and you've got other researchers too that have studied how your average evoked potentials that the brain, these are brain waves, your average evoked potentials of the brain waves. You can use EEGs to determine personality and IQ of a person. So when a child is born, they begin testing its brain to see what is this person's personality, what type of thinking is this person capable of, what type of career should we plan out for this person. So they take the natural bent of the mind, the natural capabilities of the mind, and they work with that. Likewise, when they're doing the traumatization and they're splitting the mind, they work with the child's creativity and they work with what those pieces of the mind, those pieces of the mind think. Say perhaps by 18 months they'll be doing their EEGs and determining what they want to do. Then they begin the mind control to structure the person for that career. This is why people like myself who have a natural intelligence but have never been connected to any of these bloodlines, we have such a hard time out there in the competition because the Illuminati can take a particular child, and since they can manipulate things from behind the scenes, they can open all the right doors for this person, and they can get them the grants and the schooling and everything they need, and then adding impetus to this person's career is the mind control that's steering them in that direction too. So the end product is you end up with somebody who's an engineer or a lawyer or a politician who's very highly qualified for what they're doing.
So what kind of things would, once they have controlled somebody, what kind of things would they be used to do for the Illuminati?
The mind control, this is something that, again, has not been brought out very well by other people, and maybe it's just simply because they're not aware of it. But the mind control is not just to create somebody who's a sexual slave, but it's to infiltrate and control society across the board. Understand that if you're going to control something like they control establishment medicine, you have to have your people in key positions because the weakest link of a chain is going to break. So you can't have any weak links. So they salt their people throughout society in general, from the gutter to the castles. But like, let's say you're trying to control medicine because the establishment medical system brings them in lots of money, and the medical establishment, as you may know, is very powerful. So you have to have control of the entire spectrum of things: the hospitals, what kind of health care is going to be available, the type of training that the doctors are going to get. They've created secret strike forces like the CCHI and the NCHF. All of this requires mind-controlled slaves being salted in throughout the entire system. If you had one weak link, the control is, for instance, if you have somebody who's practicing alternative medicine and you don't control the judicial system, let's say he's a homeopathic doctor and he's arrested on false charges, well, you're not going to be able to convict him if you're not controlling the judicial system. So, again, like I say, you've got to have this vast secret apparatus. And this is why it becomes, until people understand the mind control, they can't understand how there could possibly be the type of control that they have.
Right. So I guess in order to understand like how they are able to control these people that they have put in key positions in society, we do have to talk more about the techniques of mind control, and maybe we can go into that now of how they are able to affect control over these people. For example, the trauma.
Well, yeah, the trauma would be used for a whole number of reasons. When you traumatize somebody, where you traumatize them to the point where they almost die, or actually, to be more specific, they actually do kill these people, but they know exactly how many seconds they can allow them to be killed and still bring them back to life. So they manipulate near-death experiences. They have that down to a science. What that trauma does is it puts the brain back into a survival mode. And now I have to get into explaining that the popular concept of the brain being one monolithic brain is real deceptive. It's been kept very secret that the human brain, is actually 7 brains. And the first brain of the human mind, the medulla and the pons, is called the reptilian brain because it thinks like a reptilian. And if you're always traumatizing a person, you keep them in their reptilian thinking, where they're survival-based thinking. And survival-based thinking, there's certain characteristics that go along with that thinking. The trauma can be used to keep somebody within their survival-based thinking. It also creates fear, and there's a whole series of things that spiritually happen to a person when they get caught up in fear. They want to maintain a high level of trance and dissociative behavior of the victim, so they like to continue traumatizing the person. But as I just brought out earlier, there's more involved here than just keeping the dissociative level high. You're also trying to maintain the person to stay in the reptilian survival-based thinking. You're also trying to keep them having a spirit of fear controlling their life. The parents of the children that are being programmed are secretly trained in how to abuse their children so that they can help keep their children very dissociative. Each one of those personalities has been given a separate history, a separate personality, has its own likes, dislikes. And what you've done is you've turned what was one person into a whole city of people. And the only way that the mind of the slave can function is if it relies upon the master to give it some stability. Imagine if your mind was a whole series of competing persons, each with their own ideas and likes and dislikes. The only way to bring some order out of the chaos would be to have some controlling entity controlling that chaos. And some of the slaves that reach the point of actually becoming aware that they are multiples, on the deeper levels, realize that they need the mind control for their minds not to break down into total craziness. Another way of looking at it is is what the Illuminati are doing are creating controlled insanity, in that for these victims of the mind control to endure the horrific trauma that's given to them, they have to isolate their memories of that trauma, and the parts of the mind that have to pick up some of that trauma, some of those parts in essence, and if those walls of disassociation break down, then the other parts of the mind are going to have to deal with a lot of garbage.
Well, why do you think they needed so many identities to be put in place?
Well, if you're going to invest the time to create a robot, you want to build in as many capabilities into that robot as possible, and you want to compartmentalize everything so everything's secret. One of the reasons why intelligence agencies function so well, like for instance the CIA, is that they compartmentalize everything. You only know on a need-to-know basis. Well, they do the same with these people's minds. A slave may function on many different levels. He's got his front, which they create the best front possible. That's his everyday life, or her everyday life. But then they may want to use that person for drug smuggling, money laundering, carrying messages, performing satanic rituals, producing porn movies, assassinating somebody, spying on somebody. In order for that city of people to function, you have to have different jobs. You'll have some of the older personalities taking care of baby personalities internally in the person's mind. So you've got functions, you've got gatekeepers, you've got hierarchy alters that are controlling other alters. You've got a hierarchy of personalities. What you're doing is that's a whole, and that's a whole science in itself on how to structure the disassociated parts of the mind.